Hey, picture this. It's the year 1886. You rise with the sun, or rather, with the frost biting at your nose. And it feels like just another ordinary morning out on the western frontier. You're making breakfast, maybe humming to yourself, completely unaware that in just a few months, you'll be living through the most brutal winter anyone alive had ever experienced. Not just any winter. This one would turn the land into an icebox and freeze cattle in place, standing stiff in the snow like eerie frozen statues. By the way, if you enjoy diving into these kinds of stories, I'd be truly grateful if you gave a like or subscribed. I'd also love to know, where are you tuning in from and what time is it there? It blows my mind that folks from every corner of the world fall asleep listening to these tales. All right, get cozy. Let your breath slow. Let your body sink deep into whatever surface is cradling you, blanket bed, sofa, or floor. Because tonight, we're taking a slow journey back to that fateful winter of 1886. And by the end of it, you'll be counting your blessings for your warm bed and the sturdy roof overhead. So welcome. You've just woken up in a log cabin on the western frontier, and it's the dead of winter. Your eyes blink open to a murky half-light, the kind that tells you the sun hasn't quite made it up yet. Inside your cabin, the air is razor-sharp and cuts through your lungs with every breath. Your nose stings. No heated mattress here, just a creaky wooden bed shoved up against a log wall, topped with a straw-filled mattress that crunches every time you shift. The heavy blankets over you, a patchwork of wool and animal hides from beasts you either hunted yourself or traded for when the weather was kind. You don't bolt upright. You lie still, staring at the ceiling beams, summoning the will to escape your cocoon. Because here's the thing: the fire burned out hours ago, and the inside of your home is barely warmer than the frozen tundra outside. Your windows, if you're lucky enough to have glass, and not just oiled paper, are iced over in intricate frost patterns, nature's own artwork carved in silence overnight. It would be beautiful if it weren't a shivering reminder that you're waking up in a world that wants to freeze you alive. In the gray light, you see your breath drifting like smoke in front of your face. You push one hand from under the blankets and instantly regret it. The air feels like it could crack your skin. It's a predatory cold, sharp and unforgiving, numbing your fingers within seconds. Still, you know stalling won't make it any better. You throw off the covers with a groan and immediately reach for the bundle of clothes you stashed at the foot of the bed the night before, your own little life hack to avoid putting on icy garments in the morning. Pioneer wisdom passed down through frosty mornings and frozen fingers. Your feet touch the floor, wooden planks so cold they feel like stepping onto a sheet of steel. Even through thick wool socks, the jolt of cold climbs up your legs like an electric current. There's no time to waste. You need that fire. Lighting the morning fire wasn't some peaceful ritual. It was a matter of survival, a race against frostbite. You scramble to the corner of your cabin, where a small iron stove waits dark and cold. Last night's ashes are chilled and gray. But you're ready. You've got a bundle of kindling stacked nearby, thin splintered wood, maybe a scrap of newspaper or some dried prairie grass. And the most vital item of all, a box of matches which you kept tucked close to your body all night so they wouldn't absorb any moisture and become useless. with fingers already stiff. You arrange the tinder with practiced hands, then strike a match. The tiny flame wavers weak and trembling in the icy air, and you shield it with your palm like it's a newborn bird. Because out here, a match isn't just a flame, it's a miracle. It's the beginning of warmth, of life, of hope. The flame catches. Relief washes over you. A small victory. You feed the fire gently first with kindling, then thicker sticks, then finally some logs. The cast iron stove creaks and groans, warming up slowly. First, the metal heats, then the space around it begins to thaw little by little. The cabin's still freezing, but now there's a whisper of comfort curling in the air. Now here's where things get unexpectedly fascinating. You're probably imagining firewood, right thick logs, cut and split, stacked neatly outside your door. But out on the open plains, trees are a luxury. You know what the settlers actually burned buffalo chips. Yep, dried buffalo dung. And when buffalo started disappearing, cow chips took their place. Sounds disgusting maybe, but out here, it was genius. Once dried buffalo chips burned hot and clean with surprisingly little smell. They were everywhere, cost nothing, and could be stored in piles outside or inside without much issue. When a single tree might be 10 miles away, buffalo chips kept families alive. You open the stove door and add a few dried chips to the growing fire. They catch fast and burn steady. You hold your hands, close fingers, outstretched. The heat soaks into your knuckles and palms, and the ache of cold starts to lift like fog burning off under morning sun. It's that primal kind of joy, like clutching a mug of hot coffee after being out in a blizzard. Outside, darkness still clings to the horizon. Dawn is a while off. Winter days are cruelly short, and there's never enough time to do everything that survival demands. Your cabin, it's tiny, humble, 14 by 16 feet, tops barely bigger than a modern bedroom. But it's everything. Kitchen, bedroom, dining room, and sometimes when blizzards rage, your entire world. If you're lucky enough to live near trees, your home might be a log cabin, chinked with mud or moss or clay to keep out the wind. But maybe you're on the plains in a sod house, a soddy, made from bricks of prairie grass and dirt. Sod walls kept the cold at bay, better than drafty wood. Cool in summer, warm in winter. But they weren't perfect. Bugs lived in the walls. So did snakes. And when the rain came heavy, your house might literally start melting. You start your morning rounds. There's a little table, a stool, maybe a trunk with some extra clothes. The windows are tiny because glass was expensive, heavy, and fragile. Every opening in the house was a gateway for warmth to slip out. Some homes had no windows at all, just a door and a smoke hole in the roof. And speaking of smoke, now that your fire is really burning, a thin haze floats in the cabin. Your chimney's doing its best, but this isn't a cozy Victorian hearth. It's a janky, patched-together pipe that leaks. Still, you've gotten used to it. Smoke in the lungs beats frost on the toes. Now that the stove's hot enough, you set a cast iron pot on top. Inside water, maybe from the stream yesterday, or melted snow and dried beans that have been soaking overnight. If fortune smiled on you, you might drop in a scrap of salt pork. It's not much, but it's hot. And it's food. You throw on another layer. Out here, staying warm wasn't about a thick jacket. It was strategy. Start with long johns, wool or flannel, then a heavy shirt wool again. Wool was the miracle material of the frontier. Wet or dry, it kept you alive. Cotton could kill, Once it got wet, it clung to you like ice. That's why folks said cotton kills. Next, a wool vest for your core. Then a heavy coat. On your legs, thick trousers or more wool layers. Wool trousers, thick, scratchy and reliable, cover your legs. And if you plan to be riding, you pull leather chaps over them for added protection. Your feet, wrapped in multiple layers of wool socks, then slid into heavy leather boots, waterproofed the old-fashioned way, with beeswax or animal fat rubbed into every seam. Your hands hidden inside mittens instead of gloves. Benefit from one of nature's simple efficiencies. When fingers huddle together, they share warmth. Isolated, they freeze. And then there's the hat. No frontier settler worth their salt would dare brave a winter morning without it. Heat flees the head faster than any other part of the body. So you pull a thick wool cap over your ears, low enough to meet your collar. If you had the means or the skill, you might wear fur instead. Rabid beaver buffalo creatures whose coats were built by nature to endure the kind of cold that slices through bone. A fur-lined hat and coat could mean the difference between a bitter inconvenience and your last breath. Today, your eyes turn upward. The sky looks wrong. There's a thickness to the clouds, a heavy silence in the air. You've seen this before. You've learned to read the signs just like the old-timers who've survived enough winters to tell the tale. A storm is coming. You step outside and the cold doesn't just meet you, it knocks you back. It has weight force personality. It's not just freezing, it's predatory. The temperature might be -20, but it's the wind that gets you. Out here on the plains, there's nothing to slow it. No trees, no hills. Just endless open land, giving the wind room to build speed and slice through every stitch of fabric you're wearing. The animals come first, always. Maybe you have a single cow for milk, a few clucking chickens, a tired old horse or mule. These aren't just livestock, they're your lifeline. You rely on them, and they rely on you. You head to the barn, if you can call it that. A lean-to, perhaps, hastily nailed together, its only real purpose to block the wind. It's hardly warmer inside, but the animals huddle together for body heat. Their breath floats in warm clouds, their sides steaming faintly in the frigid air. The smell hay fur manure is oddly comforting. You break the ice off the trough. It's thick. You pour in fresh water, heavy buckets, carried from the well, the stream, or perhaps snow, melted painstakingly over the fire. Next comes the feed. You toss hay or grain into the troughs. You ration it, because deep in your mind, you're always counting, how long will the supply last? How much do you need to stretch it to make it to spring? Too little, and your animals weaken. Too much, and you run out early. It's not an equation, it's a gamble. And the stakes are life or death. Your fingers begin to scream beneath your mittens. Not figuratively, literally. The pain of cold shifts suddenly from sting to throb to numb. You know the signs. You've seen what happens to people who ignore them. Blackened fingertips, nose tips lost to the wind, ears frozen stiff like leather. The cold doesn't forgive mistakes. You hurry back to the cabin where the iron stove glows red and welcoming. Breakfast has been simmering while you worked. Beans and pork bubbling slowly, the aroma dense and comforting in the tiny room. You eat quickly, crouched near the stove, the hot food chasing the chill from your chest and core. But the wind outside hasn't gone away. It's getting worse. The snow now stings when it hits bare skin, fine and sharp as ground glass. You brace yourself, because what's coming isn't just another cold day, it's a blizzard. And blizzards out here don't just disrupt, they devour. You've heard the stories. January 1887, one of the worst in memory. 16 inches of snow in just a few hours. Temperatures that dropped to -46. The wind sculpted snow into towering drifts that swallowed entire homes. People died steps from safety, lost in white so thick you couldn't see your own outstretched hands. They found bodies in spring frozen just feet from their doors. You're not going to let that happen. You take a rope, thick and rough, and tie one end to the door of your cabin, the other to your barn. It's a lifeline. When the snow comes and visibility disappears, you'll need that rope to find your way between warmth and responsibility. You haul in extra firewood or buffalo chips if that's what you've got, stacking them near the stove. You check your pantry beans, flour, maybe some dried apples. You calculate silently. How many days could you last snowed in? Then comes the waiting. That eerie calm before a storm. A strange hush. The birds are silent. The trees stand still. The very air seems to pause, and then the first flakes fall, slowly, lazily, harmless, almost playful. But within minutes, they multiply, dancing sideways as the wind finds its voice. It howls and screams, clawing at the corners of your home, digging through every crack. The temperature plummets. Snow creeps through windowsills and knotholes, collecting in miniature drifts on the inside of your cabin. You feed the fire higher than usual. It's not wasteful. It's survival. By nightfall, it could be 40 below. Cold enough to freeze skin in minutes. You light a candle. The flicker of its flame casts a golden ring against the creeping dark. You make a simple supper. More beans. Maybe cornbread, if your stores allow. Then you prepare for the long, long night. The wind outside is relentless. It shrieks, wails. It sounds like something alive, angry and searching. You pile every blanket you own onto your bed. You heat stones in the fire, wrap them in cloth, and tug them under the covers to create islands of warmth. An old trick, yes, but life-saving. And as you lie there cocooned against the freezing dark, something profound settles over you. You remember what the frontier always taught: no one survives alone. You think about the neighbors, maybe a mile away, maybe more. Are they safe? Do they have food fuel? When the storm breaks, you'll check on them, not because it's charity, but because it's what people do. That's how folks survived out here together. They built barns, raised houses, brought in harvests, shoulder to shoulder. And when winter tried to kill them, they shared firewood, shared meals, shared knowledge. Because someday, you might be the one knocking at a neighbor's door with empty hands and frozen skin. That's the true secret of frontier survival. Not just wool and fur, not fire and grit, but connection. Human warmth. Community. You shift in bed, sinking deeper into the warmth your own hands made. The fire hisses softly. The wind sings its mournful song outside. But you are wrapped in comfort, earned and protected. And that comfort feels richer, deeper, because it exists just inches from deathly cold. Your breath slows. Your muscles soften. You close your eyes. Morning takes its time arriving. You wake slowly to a world muffled in white. The blizzard has eased, the shrieking calmed to a whispering snowfall. But danger still lurks in the stillness. Your fires burn low again, and rising from your nest is another shock to the system. But you move quicker now. Your body knows the rhythm. You stoke the fire the cold, biting less today because you've already survived a night that could have taken you. Your breath fogs the cabin walls, now laced with glittering frost. Your own breath frozen to wood. Outside, the world has vanished under snow. Familiar paths, your yard, the road, they're all gone. A blank white canvas has swallowed it all. Snow drifts rise halfway up your cabin walls. For now, your entire world is this tiny, warm haven. A flickering island of firelight in a sea of frozen white. You are a pocket of warmth afloat in an ocean of white and cold. This isn't just another brutal winter on the frontier. This is the winter. The one they'd whisper about for generations. The winter that rewrote the rules. They'd come to call it the Great Die-Up, a bitter, ironic twist on the usual springtime roundup. Only this time there would be no gathering of cattle, because they were already dead. By the hundreds of thousands, the summer before had been scorching dry as tinder. Prairie fires ripped through the grasslands, leaving behind blackened scars where food once grew. Water sources withered. By the time the first leaves turned, the land was gasping, and the animals, both wild and domesticated, were no better. They limped into winter already weakened, already vulnerable, but nature gives warnings if you know how to read them. Birds left earlier than usual, winging south long before snow arrived. Beavers doubled their woodpiles, sensing the severity ahead. Some cattle grew shaggy coats, like they knew they'd need extra armor. The old-timers saw it coming, but not everyone listened. The big cattle barons from back east or fresh off the ships from Europe, they didn't speak the language of the land yet. They saw profit, not omen. So when the snow came early and heavy in November, those who had paid attention began bracing. Those who hadn't began to suffer. You stir your morning porridge with a wooden spoon. It's simple oats or cornmeal if you're lucky. Maybe just flour and water if supplies are running low. But in winter, food isn't just comfort. It's fuel. It's the coal shoveled into the engine of your body. It's the fire that keeps you alive. Everyone on the frontier knew it: settlers, traders, native tribes. In winter, the body demanded more fat, more protein, more food that could heat you from the inside out. That's why pemmican was so revered, a dense, rugged paste of dried meat, rendered fat, sometimes dried berries. Invented by indigenous peoples, adopted by mountain men and trappers. It didn't spoil. It packed energy like dynamite. It could save a life when the nearest meal was buried beneath a blizzard. Your stores, what you've managed to squirrel away through the fall, are your lifeline now. Salt pork, dried venison, smoked beef, root vegetables, potatoes, turnips, carrots, maybe tucked in straw boxes beneath your bed, where the warmth keeps them from freezing. Dried beans and corn fill canvas sacks. Jars of pickled fruit if you had the foresight. And if you're really lucky, a chunk of coffee, precious bitter gold. You add a small square of it to a boiling pot of water on the stove. The scent alone warms your soul. If you've run out, you might steep pine needles instead. Not tasty, but full of vitamin C. A pine needle brew could mean the difference between life and scurvy. Outside, the animals wait. They don't understand storms or survival. But you do. You bundle yourself up, layer by layer, sealing heat into your body, like a fortress against the cold. Frontier winter wear wasn't glamorous. It was tactical genius. Closest to your skin, long underwear, long johns. Not the thin, stretchy thermals of today. These were thick, scratchy suits made from wool or flannel. One piece if you were unlucky with that legendary rear flap, two pieces if you were modern. They trapped heat close to your body, the first defense against death by exposure. Above that, a wool shirt, often flannel. Women wore heavy dresses layered with petticoats for insulation. Men added a wool vest over their shirt, another shield for the vital organs. Then the coat, thick, heavy, preferably fur-lined. Buffalo hides were king massive, warm, nearly indestructible. Beaver, rabbit, anything nature had already equipped for sub-zero survival. Your legs, wool trousers, sometimes with extra lining. Cowboys threw on leather chaps, real ones, not for show. Woolies were the warmest made from Angora goat hides, with the long, shaggy hair still attached. They looked ridiculous, but they worked. Feet needed special care. Frostbite started there. 2 pairs of wool socks, maybe 3. Thick leather boots, waterproofed with beeswax or animal fat. Some wrapped their feet with cloth beneath the socks, an ancient trick from colder places. Gloves were okay, but mittens were better. When fingers huddled together, they stayed alive. The best mittens had fur outside, wool inside, and gauntlets that reached halfway to your elbow, sealing out snow like a second skin, and of course the hat. No one, absolutely no one, went bareheaded. A fur cap with ear flaps, a wool scarf wrapped tight around your face. Together, they made a kind of homespun balaclava. Fashion be damned. You weren't here to look good. You were here to not die. You pull open the cabin door. Even braced for it, the cold punches you in the chest. It's solid. Not just air, but presence. You're walking through something, not into it. Your beard or scarf instantly collects ice crystals from your own breath. The snow is high, 2 feet at least. Drifts reach your knees. Each step is a workout. You sweat beneath the layers, and that's a danger too. Sweat becomes ice. Ice becomes death. You thank your past self for tying that rope. The guideline that stretches from your door to the barn is your salvation. One mittened hand stays glued to it. Without it, you could lose your way and vanish in a storm that turns familiar paths into white nothing. The animals are waiting. You find them in the barn, breath steaming from their nostrils, eyes wide and alert. They're hungry, thirsty, just as confined by the storm as you are. You get to work. First, the ice. Thick as your hand, it covers the water trough like a lid. You break it with a crowbar or boot heel. You haul water if you have to. Then the feed precious hay, doled out with measured caution. There has to be enough to last until spring. And spring in a year like this might not come until May. And while your little homestead is holding, Barely others aren't so lucky. The great cattle ranches of the open plains. They're watching their herds vanish. Before this winter, the system seemed perfect. Let the cattle roam across endless, unfenced land. Let them fatten on native grasses. Brand them in spring, sell them in fall. No need for barns, no need for feed. Just let nature do the work. But this winter broke that illusion. It exposed the flaw in the whole dream of the open range. Because when the grass ran out, when the snow buried the earth, when the wind howled like a curse and the temperature dropped past, what bone and blood could endure, the cattle didn't have barns. They didn't have hay. They had nothing, and so they stood in the drifts, still unmoving, eyes frozen shut. Some froze to death standing up. The plains were littered with carcasses. In some places, the stench of decay would linger into summer. It was a tragedy, but it was also a turning point. This was the moment when ranchers realized the West wouldn't bend to their will. It had its own rules, and it played for keeps. And as you finish your morning chores, trudging back through the snow toward the glow of your tiny cabin, you carry that knowledge with you, etched into your bones by wind and frost. You don't fight the winter, you endure it. That almost feels sacred. You pause for a moment, breath hanging in the motionless air like smoke from a long-forgotten fire. The silence isn't emptiness, it's full of memory, of consequence of lives lived hard against a merciless sky. The world has been reset under a blanket of glittering white. But it's not peace, it's a pause. And every seasoned settler knows this kind of stillness is temporary. The cattle, those once prized symbols of freedom and prosperity, didn't stand a chance. They had no barns, no stored hay, no hands to break ice for their drinking water. They stood exposed to the blizzards, unblinking in the face of death. Some huddled against fence lines, as if that wooden barrier could protect them from the wind that sliced flesh like a knife. Others simply starved their heads, buried futilely in snowdrifts, searching for grass that was long gone. By spring, the Great Plains were a graveyard. Carcasses sprawled across open range, frozen where they fell. When the thaw came, the smell rose with the warming air. Rivers choked with bloated bodies swept southward in grim, slow processions. Ranchers who had dined on silver in the fall now counted their debts in silence. Fortunes vanished with the frost. Even Theodore Roosevelt, future president, rugged man of the frontier, lost more than half his herd on his Dakota ranch. He called the losses crippling, and they were. That season ended more than just cattle. It ended the era of myth. The open range, the vast wild freedom, was no longer a sustainable fantasy. After that winter, ranchers changed. They had to. They fenced land-built shelters, stored hay. They culled their herds to manageable numbers. No more letting nature do all the work. If you didn't prepare for winter, you didn't survive it. You returned to your cabin, following the rope again through the bright silence. Your body is warm from labor, but that warmth is short-lived. It seeps away the moment you stop moving. Inside, you peel off your layers, with care hanging wool and fur near but not too near the stove. Wet clothing is dangerous. Even a little moisture trapped inside a boot or mitten can lead to frostbite before you notice. The rest of your day falls into the winter rhythm, a slow, necessary dance of survival. You melt snow in a pot for water as the creek is frozen solid, and you're well inaccessible under a drift. The fire needs tending every hour, sometimes more. You work with your hands, mending harnesses, patching boots, knitting a new pair of socks. A stew simmers low on the stove. Maybe a rabbit caught in a trap. Maybe just beans again. But it's warm, and it's food, and that's enough. You keep one eye on the sky. The clouds change subtly colors, shifting from gray to blue, and back again. The wind rises and dies. Even without a thermometer or forecast, you read the language of weather now like a familiar book. You plan your outdoor tasks for midday between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m., when the light is strongest and the temperature least cruel. Travel is avoided unless essential. Most folks wouldn't go more than a few dozen yards from the cabin unless they had to. Winter carves time differently. It makes solitude longer. Days blur. Work is slower, heavier. But strangely, it brings people closer, at least in spirit. You may be alone in your cabin, but you're connected to your neighbors in a quiet, vital way. After each storm, people dig their way through drifts to check on one another. If someone's running out of firewood, others bring some. If a child has a fever, someone will brave the weather to fetch help. Not out of charity, but out of shared understanding. Next time it might be you. For native tribes, winter meant something different. It was a time of gathering, not scattering. Extended families camped together, pooling resources. Stories were told, legends, lessons, histories. The winter count, a sacred scroll of buffalo hide, was unfurled and updated, recording the past year's events in symbols. Each winter earned a name: the winter of the great snow, or the winter the river froze deep. Through it, the past remained alive and present. Culture endured. Settlers didn't have the same traditions, but they learned fast that mental survival was just as important as physical. The long nights and unending isolation could eat away at the spirit. Cabin fever wasn't just a phrase, it was a diagnosis. Restlessness, sadness, even madness. People who seemed normal in summer could become withdrawn, volatile, even dangerous by midwinter, so they found ways to keep the darkness out. Reading if they had books, knitting, carving, playing a fiddle, telling stories by firelight. Anything to pass the time, to keep the mind busy and the heart intact. And now, in the soft hush of early afternoon, the storm begins to loosen its grip. Snow still falls, but more gently now. The dense cloud cover begins to thin. Pale sunlight wane and watery filters through, casting a silvery sheen across the landscape. It's not a full reprieve, just a pause, but it's enough. You seize the moment. Outside, the world looks freshly made. Every line and edge softened by snow. Trees become sculptures. Familiar things become strange. The roof of your cabin is heavy with white, too heavy. You use a shovel to clear it, careful not to crack the boards. You check your paths, your fuel pile, your windows. This is the time to fix small things before the next storm makes them big. The air is unbelievably clear, not just cold clean. The kind of clarity that makes every sound crisp. Your breath puffs into a tiny cloud. A bird flits across the sky, just one. Its wings beat the silence like a heartbeat. For a moment, it almost feels like peace, but you know better. Winter isn't done with you yet. It's only letting you breathe. Weight of the day dissolves into the warmth of the night. Your eyes close slowly, lids heavy from cold and comfort in equal measure. The fire's glow dances softly against the cabin walls, flickering shadows like old spirits keeping vigil. You listen not just to sound, but to silence. The kind of silence that only a wilderness winter can create. Not absence, but presence. The presence of stillness. The presence of survival. Outside, the storm stirs again. You can hear it pressing against the cabin, testing the seams, sifting snow into the smallest cracks, like a thief trying windows. But it doesn't get in. Not tonight. You've prepared, endured, and adapted. You are not naive to the cold. You've danced with it, battled it, and for another day, you've won. Somewhere in your thoughts, half dreaming, you imagine the coming thaw, streams gurgling under snowbanks, sap rising in trees, calves being born, the long, low call of geese returning north. For now, it feels like myth too far off to grasp. But part of you knows the earth is simply sleeping, not dead. Beneath the weight of snow and silence, life is waiting. In this moment, lying beneath heavy quilts in a hand-built shelter, you are connected by thread and firelight to all those who came before you. The fur trappers, the buffalo hunters, the native elders telling stories through smoke. The pioneers who left everything behind to chase a dream westward and found instead a lesson in endurance. The lesson is simple. Survival is sacred. And warmth, be it from flame or from others, is a gift you never take for granted. Your breath slows. Sleep comes quietly like snow falling at dusk. Another winter night begins, and you are still here, still warm, still alive. The weather turned worse, they'd know who might need help first. This mutual aid wasn't considered charity, it was simple necessity. Frontier survival depended on each other. You didn't let pride get in the way when life and death could hinge on a borrowed sack of flour or a bundle of firewood. After warming yourself and resting, you prepare to leave. There's a reluctance on both sides. Your host grateful for the company, you hesitant to return to the lonely stretch of white between cabins. But the sky is still clear, the wind still calm, and you know better than to waste the opportunity. Before you go, they press a small bundle into your hands, perhaps a jar of preserves, a wedge of cheese, or a few fresh candles. You offer something in return from your own modest stores. This exchange is more than practical, it's symbolic. It says, we are in this together. Outside, the cold bites a little sharper after the warmth of the fire. Your breath clouds instantly. You secure your scarf, pull your hat down tighter, and climb back onto the sled or into the saddle. The sun, now tilting toward afternoon, gleams off the snow, making your eyes ache. Sunglasses didn't exist. So many frontier folk wore thin veils or pieces of smoked glass to shield against snow blindness. You squint through the brilliant white, guiding your way back by the familiar tree, the hill crest, the rhythm of the land stored in your memory. By the time you return to your own cabin, dusk is falling again. The sky turns violet, then deep indigo as stars begin to pierce the clean air. The blizzard's roar has become a memory, now replaced by the absolute stillness that settles over a winter night. Inside, the fire has burned low. You set to work quickly, feeding the animals, checking the water trough, adding fuel to the stove, and hanging your snow-wet clothes to dry. Every movement is deliberate, purposeful, necessary. Dinner is simple but welcome. Perhaps hot cornmeal mush with a spoon of molasses or stew left over from the night before. You eat slowly, fatigue settling in your bones. Your muscles ache from the cold and the trail breaking, but there's a quiet satisfaction in that ache. You've done what needed to be done. You reached out. You connected. Later, wrapped in blankets, you sit near the fire with a piece of mending or a journal. Maybe a Bible passage or a letter from home is read aloud by flickering lamplight. Winter nights on the frontier were long, but they weren't empty. They were filled with the small, rich textures of survival warmth, work memory, and the closeness of the few humans who shared your patch of wilderness. As the wind begins to stir again outside, you bang the fire for the night. The fire hisses softly under the ash, promising to hold its glow until morning. You crawl into bed, pulling every layer of blanket around you, tucking the heated rock against your feet, and listening for the soft shifting sounds of the cabin as the wood contracts in the cold. The quiet darkness of the frontier night wraps around you again, not just like a friend, but like a promise. A promise that tomorrow, if you wake, you'll rise and do it all again. That life, though hard, is still being lived here, flame by flame, hand by hand, heart by heart, one winter day at a time. Support, warmth, and protection. Tasks were shared. Men hunted women, prepared hides, and food. Elders passed down stories and knowledge by the firelight. The collective memory of countless winters lived and endured was kept alive through song, oral history, and tradition. Their diet, too, was well adapted. Pemmican dried berries, roasted corn, and carefully smoked meat. Nothing was wasted, and everything had a purpose in the survival rhythm of the cold season. As you sit back by your own fire, rubbing warmth into your hands, you're struck by the quiet echoes of these many winter strategies. How different they were, yet how alike in intent. Whether in a sod cabin or a buffalo hide lodge, people had always adapted to the cold with what they had and what they knew. Some knowledge came from books, some from experience, some from neighbors, and some, like the wisdom of indigenous peoples, had been cultivated across centuries. The wind has started to rise again outside, moaning around the corners of your cabin like a restless spirit. Snow begins to fall anew, thick and soft, muffling every sound. You pull your blanket tighter around your shoulders and move closer to the fire. Dinner is modest, maybe a few slices of dried meat, and the last of yesterday's bread, but satisfying. You're too tired for much more. Fatigue settles over you like another blanket. Before sleeping, you take a final look through the window. The landscape is already vanishing beneath fresh snow. Your own tracks, your sled's ruts, your hard-earned trail, soon they'll be gone again, as though no one had moved through this place in days. But you'll know. You'll remember. The small acts of care and connection, the firewood traded the stories, shared the invisible threads that held a scattered frontier together against all odds. You bang the fire again, nestle into your bed, layered deep in wool and fur, and feel the day's exhaustion ease from your bones. The darkness presses close, not as a threat tonight, but as a blanket. The blizzard may rage again tomorrow. There may be more hardship, more frostbite warnings, more food calculations, more worry. But tonight, you've done all you can. You've survived another day. And on the frontier, in the harsh winter of 1886-87, that was no small triumph. The candle flickers gently, casting soft shadows that dance across the rough-hewn walls of your cabin. Outside, the wind has returned, sighing through the eaves, whispering over snow-laden fields, a mournful song that has played every night since the blizzard began. Inside, however, there is a pocket of warmth and calm. The fire's orange glow pulses with quiet life, and your breath no longer fogs the air. As you clean your simple meals remains, perhaps using snow melted over the stove to wash your tin dishes, you reflect on how every act, no matter how small, feels meaningful in this season. Survival in winter is a string of deliberate choices, none grand, but all vital. Even now, carefully placing your dish upside down so it doesn't freeze or collect dust overnight is part of the choreography of endurance. You check the walls for drafts using old towels or bits of burlap stuffed into cracks. Every saved scrap matters. Insulation is less a product and more a practice. Some settlers used newspaper pasted to walls or layers of canvas stretched between logs. Others lined their cabins with pelts or surplus cloth. Whatever held still air could help trap heat. The candle burns low as you climb into bed. Your sleeping area has been carefully prepared. Warm rocks wrapped in cloth at your feet, extra blankets folded within arm's reach, and perhaps a flannel nightshirt, soft warm, and one of your few indulgences. You sleep close to the stove if space allows your bed arranged to make the most of residual heat. Maybe there's a sleeping partner, spouse, child, or even a dog adding their body warmth to yours. In winter, shared heat is no small thing. Before blowing out the candle, your eyes rest once more on the logs in the firebox, now glowing softly. There is peace in their glow, and in knowing they will keep your cabin above freezing through the long night ahead. It is a peace hard won by generations who learned from experience, adapted with creativity, and endured with grit. Lying beneath the heavy weight of your blankets, you listen to the fire crackle the wind outside and the gentle creak of settling timbers. Each sound reminds you that your home, though small and humble, is a fortress against the cold. Tomorrow, the blizzard might worsen, or it might break. You might be called to dig out a neighbor ration your dwindling flour or chop more firewood. But for tonight, you are warm. You are fed. You are alive. And in the great winter of 1886-87, that was more than enough. You might heat stones in the fire or fill jugs with hot water to tuck beneath the blankets, creating pockets of warmth that would last deep into the night. The bedtime routine involved more than just comfort. It was about survival. Doors were securely barred, not so much against thieves, but to guard against the more likely threat of predators, driven by desperation and hunger. Windows were shuttered or covered in heavy cloth to prevent precious heat from slipping away into the frozen darkness. Then came what was perhaps the most important winter survival tactic of all rest. In the frigid frontier, the human body consumed calories not just for labor, but to generate heat and maintain core temperature. The colder it got, the more energy was burned. Without adequate sleep, even the strongest bodies could not endure the relentless drain. Sleep on the frontier followed a rhythm unfamiliar to many today. Lacking the constant glow of artificial light, most people simply went to bed when it was dark and rose with the sun. This meant longer nights of sleep in the winter and shorter ones in summer. In fact, many experienced what's now called biphasic sleep. A first sleep after nightfall, followed by a wakeful period around midnight, and then a second sleep until dawn. During those quiet hours in between, people might stoke the fire, tend to small chores, pray read by candlelight, or simply lie awake reflecting. This ancient sleep pattern observed across many pre-industrial societies may have been more natural than the modern expectation of 8 uninterrupted hours, and in the bitter cold, it allowed fires to be checked during the most dangerous hours without pulling the body out of deep rest. As you settle beneath your heavy blankets, the warmth you've carefully preserved wraps around you like a cocoon. Your thoughts drift to the promise of spring. Though it feels impossibly distant now, your memory and experience assure you it will come. The snow will eventually melt, grass will sprout through the thawed earth, and birds will return to fill the sky with song. It isn't quite optimism that fuels you. It's something steadier, a belief in cycles, in inevitability, in nature's relentless march forward. Muscles relax as the warmth seeps in, melting away the last tension of the day. Outside, the wind moans again, weaving through tree branches and the eaves of the cabin. But from within your bed, the sound only underscores your safety. The wind is not in here. You've kept it at bay. Your breathing slows, in and out, deep and even. The ache in your limbs fades into heaviness, your senses slipping towards sleep. You think of the neighbors you visited, the quiet web of connection between scattered homes. Those links mean everything out here. They are a lifeline just as vital as fire or food. You feel in that moment not alone, but woven into something larger. Outside, the stars emerge in unimaginable numbers, glittering in a sky clearer than any city could ever offer. The moon hangs high, casting a soft silvery light across the snow. Even in darkness, the world is radiant. You picture that landscape as your eyes begin to close, a silent, ancient expanse that will keep turning while you rest. The days pass with steady rhythm. Each morning brings the same set of challenges: stoke the fire feed. The animals melt snow or break ice for water combat, the cold that presses in from every side. Yet, within that sameness, there are tiny, significant changes. The sun lingers a little longer each afternoon. The light grows bolder, slightly warmer. You notice these things because you have learned to look. Spring speaks softly before it shouts through the angle of sunlight. The timing of bird calls, the feel of the snow beneath your boots. You've organized your life around the fire, the beating heart of your home. Its heat defines your cabin's layout and your daily decisions. Near the stove is a drying area, socks, mittens, and boots arranged carefully to evaporate moisture without scorching. In winter, damp clothes aren't just uncomfortable, they can be lethal. Even a slight chill from wet wool could spiral into frostbite or hypothermia. On the far side of the cabin, in the coldest corners, you store what needs to stay: frozen meat, jugs of milk, or even perishable medicine frozen into a kind of crude, icy preservation. Your whole home, perhaps no more than 14 by 16 feet, is a carefully orchestrated balance of heat, cold order, and purpose. Beds serve as daytime benches. Tables fold against walls. Storage climbs upward onto shelves and hooks. Then one morning, during your habitual scan of the land, you notice something subtle. The snow outside carries a thin crust still soft enough to step through, but no longer powder. It's the first skin of melt and freeze. It means something that temperatures have risen, if only a little. Your trained eyes register this as a milestone, a promise. Frontier survival required more than brute strength, it demanded perception. Without weather forecasts, people read the sky like scripture. Generations of observation distilled into memory and song. Cloud shapes, wind direction, the behavior of animals, even the way chimney smoke twisted or rose. These were your early warning systems. Red sky at night, sailors' delight. Red sky in morning, sailors take warning. Such sayings were not folklore, they were life-saving signals. The ability to read the sky could be the difference between returning safely home and freezing just steps from your door. Indigenous peoples honed this skill to an art form over millennia. Many tribes appointed weather watchers, individuals trained to observe and interpret the subtlest signs of change. Their guidance shaped decisions about hunting, travel, and shelter. European settlers brought their own weather wisdom from the old world. Much of it failed on the plains. But through bitter trial and costly error, a new hybrid knowledge emerged, born of experience adapted to a harsher continent, shared among all who depended on its accuracy. Now bundled in heavy layers, you step outside once more to begin your chores. You move steadily, not too fast. Sweat could chill you dangerously in this cold. The animals come first. They always do. Perhaps you tend a small herd, a milk cow, a few chickens, maybe a pig destined for spring butchering. Even with their natural adaptations, thicker coats, herd behavior. Instinctual, huddling, domesticated animals need your help to survive. Their shelters must be as secure as your own cracks, sealed hay stacked against walls, water containers protected from freezing. A frozen trough means a thirsty animal. A thirsty animal is a sick one, and sickness can spread fast. These tasks, repeated each day with little variation, are not drudgery. They are devotion, quiet acts of stewardship that keep a small corner of the world turning no matter how wild the wind howls outside. The winter of 1886-87 stands as one of the most devastating in frontier memory, particularly for livestock. Cattle on the open range suffered immensely. A brutal combination of drought during the previous summer, early and heavy snowfalls, and prolonged record-breaking cold created conditions too extreme for even the toughest animals. Thousands of head of cattle perished, often within sight of hay they couldn't reach, beneath snowdrifts or frozen rivers they couldn't cross. The losses were catastrophic. Ranchers who survived the financial blow knew things had to change. The age of vast, open, unfenced herds roaming wild was drawing to a close. In its place rose a new kind of ranching, more structured, more strategic. Cattlemen turned to smaller, more manageable herds. They fenced their land, stored hay, and built sturdier shelters. This transformation rippled across the West, reshaping its economy and culture. The freewheeling image of the cowboy, constantly pushing herds across an endless range, faded into myth. By the early 1890s, the last great cattle drives were behind them. Railroads had pushed far enough west to make long drives unnecessary, and barbed wire made them all but impossible. As you finish tending to your livestock, you glance upward. The sky is a hard, brittle blue, an indicator of persistent cold. But a high, wispy veil of clouds drifts in from the west, hinting at possible change. For now, though, it's stable enough to take on an outdoor task you've been postponing, maybe mending a fence, chopping and hauling firewood, or clearing the snow from the path to your water source. Frontier winters didn't leave room for laziness, but they demanded caution. Outdoor labor was timed carefully to match the warmest part of the day usually between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m., when your breath didn't freeze instantly and your fingers retained just enough dexterity to tie a knot or grip a saw. You worked deliberately. Too much exertion, and you'd sweat beneath your layers, a dangerous mistake when wet clothing could chill you to the bone once you stopped moving. Every action took longer in winter. Thick coats and gloves, limited movement. Snow created constant resistance. Fingers stiffened tasks, blurred into slow motion, and the simplest chores became tests of endurance. Yet the season wasn't entirely a burden. Some work was better suited to winter. Logging, for instance, was mainly a cold weather job. Frozen ground made hauling easier, and sleds could slide heavy loads over snow more efficiently than wagons over mud. Ice harvesting was another key winter industry in the pre-refrigeration era. Teams of workers cut great blocks of ice from rivers and lakes, storing them in ice houses insulated with sawdust or straw. Properly stored, that ice would last through summer, used to preserve food, or occasionally to create luxuries like chilled drinks or ice cream. Trapping was also at its most productive in the depths of winter. Animal furs reached peak thickness, becoming more valuable. The income from trapping sometimes bridged the gap between scraping by and relative comfort. It wasn't just work, it was survival strategy. By midday, you've made decent progress. The warmth of physical activity has kept the cold at bay, but now hunger presses in. You head back to your cabin where the fire has been carefully banked to burn low and slow while you are gone. Lunch is simple, but sustaining perhaps a thick slice of bread and a wedge of cheese or yesterday's stew warmed on the stove. Winter diets differed greatly from the abundance of summer. With no fresh produce, unless you had a well-stocked root cellar, meals were repetitive and heavy on storage staples: flour-dried beans, rice potatoes, and salted or smoked meats. This dietary monotony, paired with confinement and isolation, often led to cabin fever, a mix of vitamin deficiency, mental fatigue, and emotional strain. Symptoms ranged from mild irritability to deep depression. Native communities had long known how to counter these dangers. Many tribes gathered vitamin-rich plants, like rose hips in the fall, and dried them for winter use. Their winter calendars were filled with ceremonies, games, storytelling, and communal events designed to nourish the spirit. Settlers borrowed from these traditions and created their own quilting bees, barn dances, church socials, or informal literary societies. These events didn't just fill time, they helped maintain mental health. Inside individual homes, families invented their own routines. Evenings were often dedicated to shared activities, reading aloud from treasured books, playing music, sewing, or storytelling. When children weren't needed in the fields, especially during winter, they focused on learning. Many rural schools operated mainly in the cold months, closing in spring and fall, when farm labor demanded all hands. For families too remote to attend a schoolhouse, winter became a time for home education, often led by a parent or older sibling. The lessons focused not just on letters and numbers, but on practical survival skills: how to mend, preserve, calculate, or navigate the world. By mid-afternoon, you notice a shift. The high clouds from earlier have thickened, lowering to form a dull, oppressive sky. The sun fades behind a gray veil. The wind has turned now, blowing from the south, slightly warmer but heavy with dampness. It presses against your skin like a wet cloth. A storm may be coming. It could be the first signs of spring, or it could mean another round of snow and wind. Either way, you prepare. You stack more firewood within arm's reach of the door. Fill water jugs in case the path to the stream becomes impassable. You cook or set aside food that can be eaten cold if the stove has to be conserved, or you're unable to venture out. To a modern observer, these steps might seem like overcaution, but here on the frontier, they're simply habit, embedded into the culture by hard experience. As twilight falls early in these northern latitudes, you light a candle or an oil lamp. The glow is modest, but precious. Candles are homemade from rendered tallow, or if you're fortunate, beeswax. Oil lamps burn kerosene, whale oil, or animal fat, each expensive or hard to come by. Light is rationed. You don't waste it. You rise with the sun and retire with the dark, using artificial light only when necessary. The long winter evenings stretch before you. They are what you make of them. In homes with books, there's reading perhaps allowed for the entire family. Where tools and thread are available, there's handwork, sewing, carving, knitting, weaving. These aren't idle pastimes. They produce clothing tools, blankets, and goods for trade. In many homes, the only furniture, rugs, or clothes came from hours of winter labor. Music, too, filled the dark. A fiddle, harmonica, or penny whistle might accompany voices. Even the humblest frontier cabin often held a song. Hymns, ballads, folk songs, tunes passed down orally across generations created a kind of warmth no fire could replicate. Singing bound families together, preserved culture, and filled the quiet spaces of the long, cold months. And so the day ends not with fanfare, but with a familiar rhythm, darkness, warmth, and a little flicker of firelight. The same elements that carried people through each winter, year after year. Winter evenings were when storytelling reached its fullest bloom. With the world outside silent and frozen, families gathered near the fire and spoke stories into the flickering shadows. These were not just for entertainment. They were vessels of memory, education, culture, and identity. Parents recited tales passed down from their own childhoods, lessons cloaked in narrative about ancestors, hardships, and moments of triumph. For children growing up in the isolation of the frontier, these stories wove them into a broader tapestry, anchoring them to a past they had never seen. Among indigenous communities, winter was often the sacred season of storytelling. Some tribes held to the tradition that certain stories could only be told when snow blanketed the ground, stories too powerful, too sacred to be spoken in the green months. Snow, in a sense, sealed the land and made it holy, and so too were the tales told over those frozen weeks. This ritualized storytelling aligned life with the earth's rhythms, reinforcing values and histories while honoring seasonal cycles. Your own evening might reflect this timeless human need to speak and listen. Perhaps you read a cherished book aloud by lamplight or mend worn clothing, your fingers guided more by habit than thought. Maybe you sit quietly, firelight dancing on the cabin walls, simply remembering winters past, how different they felt, and how each one reshaped you. Outside, the sounds of night create a symphony that modern ears used to the hum of appliances and traffic might find unnerving or eerily peaceful. The soft hiss and pop of the fire, the gentle shifting of the log walls as they contract in the cold, the long howl of a distant coyote, or the endless voice of wind brushing past every crevice. It's a language all its own. As bedtime nears, you tend the fire one last time. You bang the coals, stacking partially burned logs and covering them with ashes to ensure they smolder until morning. It's a delicate art, learned through experience and sometimes failure. A poorly banked fire means waking in darkness to a frozen hearth, brittle matches, and numb fingers. Your bed is simple, a wooden frame and a straw-stuffed mattress that creaks as you settle in. But it's a haven. Blankets warmed near the fire are layered with care coarse wool against your skin, then heavier quilts or buffalo hides over top. Heated stones wrapped in cloth or jugs filled with hot water are tucked near your feet to stave off the numbing cold. As they slowly radiate warmth, the bedding shifts from icy to cozy, and your body begins to surrender to sleep. Sleep itself was different on the frontier. Without electric lights or glowing screens to draw out the night, people drifted into rest with the setting sun. Long winter nights offered extended periods of sleep, sometimes split into two phases: a first sleep, then a brief wakefulness around midnight, portending fire's prayer or quiet contemplation, followed by a second sleep until dawn. This biphasic sleep pattern, recorded in many pre-industrial societies, might be more natural than the rigid 8-hour block modern life demands. In the depths of winter, dreams too seemed different. With the world outside hushed, sealed beneath snow and darkness, the mind turned inward. Diaries and letters from the period often describe vivid, even haunting dreams during winter's isolation, as if the soul trapped by snow and sky had to stretch its wings elsewhere. Now, as you settle into the warm cocoon of your blankets, you're acutely aware of the world beyond the thin walls. The cold remains silent, vast, deadly. Yet here inside, you've conjured life and warmth. That contrast, the nearness of death and the triumph of survival, imbues even the most mundane comforts with a kind of sacredness. Your limbs grow heavy, muscles unclench. The fire crackles softly. Somewhere far off, wind whistles past your chimney. The cabin itself creaks in the cold, a lullaby you've grown to trust. You shift slightly, finding that one perfect position where the weight of the blankets feels like security itself. A yawn escapes unhurried. The stillness of the dark wraps around you like an old familiar quilt. In the long breath before sleep, you marvel again at what it means to be human. Fragile and determined, warmed by nothing more than fire and fabric, yet surviving in a frozen wilderness. Outside, winter still reigns. The landscape, white and wind-carved, stretches into silence. But for those who know how to look, signs of change are appearing. Light lingers a little longer each evening. The sun, when it shines, feels ever so slightly stronger. Snow begins to shift in texture. Sometimes it forms a thin crust that can support weight. Other days, it clings wetly to boots and melts into boot soles. These are the first whispers of spring, murmured in snowdrifts and carried on changing winds. Yet these final weeks of winter were often the hardest of all. Food stores, carefully rationed since the first frost, now ran low. Both people and animals grew weary of confinement. The weather turned fickle, sudden thaws, followed by bone-shattering cold, turning the land into a cycle of mud, ice, and snow. Everything became unpredictable. One morning, you wake to a new sound, the slow drip of water from the cabin's eaves. The temperature has finally climbed above freezing. The snow outside has a slick, wet sheen, dazzling in the morning sun. The air smells different too, less metallic, more alive. Change is coming. In the winter of 1886-87, this thaw came with a strange mixture of hope and dread. The worst of the cold might be over, but the damage was just becoming visible. Ranchers and settlers across the plains surveyed the emerging landscape with grim eyes. What had survived? What had not? For cattle barons, the truth was devastating. Fences buried by snow barns collapsed from ice, entire herds lost to wind and starvation. Carcasses began to surface, frozen where they fell or pressed against fence lines where panicked animals had sought shelter. Some were swept into rivers, their bodies forming grotesque jams when the ice broke. The stench, when it came, was overwhelming. The loss was more than economic, it was spiritual. A way of life had ended. Even Theodore Roosevelt, whose ranch in the Dakota Territory was caught in that brutal winter, recorded his despair. The losses were crippling. For the first time, I've been utterly unable to enjoy a visit to my ranch. He lost more than half his cattle. For others, it was everything. The spring of 1887 marked a turning point. The open range system, romanticized and rugged, collapsed under the weight of reality. In its place arose a new kind of ranching, smaller herds, fenced land-stored winter feed, and a shift from cowboy myth to agricultural practicality. The frontier changed not in a single moment, but in the cumulative heartbreak of thousands of losses. For individual families, the thaw also signaled the start of a new season of labor. Repairs began immediately, roofs patched, fences rebuilt, barns re-roofed. Livestock were counted gardens, planned seeds sorted, and long isolated neighbors emerged, trudging through mud to check on each other. Faces that hadn't been seen in months reappeared with stories to tell, burdens to share. Inside your cabin, the air feels stale. The walls that once protected now feel too close. So you throw open the door. The sun streams in. You pull bedding outside to air sweep floors, scrub with melted snow. Spring cleaning isn't ritual. It's necessity. The act of shedding winter's shadows. The first step towards something new. Spring's arrival didn't just melt the snow, it thawed the human spirit. One of the first acts of true renewal, once water became abundant again, was bathing more thoroughly than had been possible for months. What had been a luxury in winter became a ritual of rebirth. With snow no longer the only source of water, families heated buckets for washing not just hands and faces, but full bodies. Children squealed at the warmth. Adults felt layers of winter stiffness scrubbed away with steam and soap. It wasn't just about cleanliness, it was about shaking off the ache of survival. Social life, too, returned with a kind of hungry joy. After a season of confinement, neighbors once again came together for barn raisings, shared chores, quilting bees, weddings, or just coffee, and laughter on porches. These gatherings carried a sweetness magnified by absence. Familiar voices long missed filled the air with music stories and a sense of belonging. Isolation had been necessary, but connection was vital, and spring gave permission to seek each other again. For indigenous communities, spring marked the beginning of new cycles. Many tribes resumed traditional migrations, following the movements of game or the budding of plants, long known for their medicinal or nutritional value. Sacred ceremonies accompanied this shift, offering thanks for survival and calling on ancestral spirits to bless the seasons of growth and renewal. Spring was not merely a change in weather, it was a spiritual turning of the wheel. For settlers especially, those farming or ranching, spring was a time of sharp contrasts, hope intertwined with worry. Could they plant in time? Would the soil waterlogged and heavy from thaw dry fast enough? Had their seed stock survived the winter's damp? Was there still enough livestock equipment and stamina to begin again? These questions hung in the air like fog over thawing fields. The survivors of the 1886-87 winter, one of the harshest in recorded American history, faced such questions with weary eyes and calloused hands. Their resilience, hard-earned and often painful, remains a testament to human endurance. Without the tools we take for granted, no phones, no snow plows, no disaster relief they endured. They learned to prepare, obsessively adapt, constantly share resources without hesitation, and trust that winter would end even if it felt endless. Many of the winter survival practices developed during that time still influence us today. The way we insulate homes, layer clothing, preserve food, and even monitor weather patterns owes a quiet debt to indigenous ingenuity and frontier necessity. These methods were learned not from books, but from frostbitten fingers and nights huddled by the last embers of fire. Yet perhaps the greatest lessons weren't physical at all. They were psychological. The people of the frontier understood how to face darkness without falling into despair. They broke the weight of isolation with routine and ritual games, song-reading handcrafts. They infused the simplest moments with meaning. A shared story, a warm biscuit, a song hummed at dusk. They embraced seasonal rhythms, hard work in summer, deep rest in winter cycles we now ignore in our electrified, always-on lives. But what's most remarkable is their relationship with winter itself. They didn't hate it, nor did they pretend it was beautiful when it wasn't. They accepted it as it was, brutal, magnificent, indifferent. They met it with equal parts fear and awe, reverence and resolve. Winter was never an enemy to defeat, but a fact of life to understand. That balance, that harmony with nature's danger and grace, might be their truest legacy. Now, as twilight deepens over the thawing prairie, you return to your cabin after one last check on the animals. The world outside has changed subtly but surely. The cold no longer bites as viciously. The wind carries the scent of damp soil instead of frozen air. Inside your familiar space feels transformed. The fire burns, but the urgency is gone. The cold is something to manage now, not fear. Tonight's dinner might feature something saved, an indulgence you resisted during harsher weeks. Perhaps the last of the summer's dried berries stirred into a warm cornbread, or a spoonful of honey drizzled onto a biscuit in celebration of the thaw. On the frontier, such luxuries weren't trivial. They were rituals of gratitude, markers of survival. As night falls, your bedtime ritual continues, but with small changes. You reach for one less blanket. You don't bang the fire quite so tightly. The edge of mortal danger has softened, and with it, your body begins to relax in ways it couldn't during the deep freeze. Sleep will still come early as the natural rhythm of the frontier day persists. But now, it's accompanied not just by exhaustion, but by relief. A quiet peace earned through months of vigilance. You lie down body heavy with honest fatigue. The blankets still feel good, but the warmth is not about survival. Now it's about comfort. The wind outside is gentler. The darkness holds no threat. Somewhere beneath the earth, roots begin to stir. Somewhere in the trees, birds are returning. Somewhere within you, something that had been clenched for months finally begins to let go. Tomorrow will bring mud and labor repairs and planting. But tonight, you rest not just because you must, but because at last you can. You settle into your bed, feeling the familiar comfort of the straw mattress that has cradled your body through months of cold nights. The blankets still offer their pleasant weight, though not as heavy as during January's brutal cold. Outside, night birds have returned their occasional calls, marking another sign of the turning season. In this quiet moment between wakefulness and sleep, your thoughts drift toward the winter, now perhaps finally ending. You remember the challenges faced, the skills sharpened, the deeper understanding gained of both human capability and nature's raw power. There's pride in having endured, satisfaction in the problems you solved, gratitude for the community that made survival possible, and hope for the warmer days to come. This cycle of seasons, each with its dangers and gifts, its work and its rest, once structured frontier life in ways we've largely forgotten. Modern life rarely orients itself around weather or daylight. We've built artificial environments that remain constant regardless of the outside world. These changes have brought undeniable comfort, but perhaps also a disconnection from the rhythms that shaped most of human experience. The lessons of winters like 1886-87 aren't just historical curiosities. They remain vital practical wisdom for resilience. Those who survived did so by preparing early gathering resources during times of plenty and developing the skills they'd need long before they became critical. They built systems that could withstand stress. They adapted. They changed their practices based on real-world conditions, not just tradition or comfort. They learned. They observed. They remained flexible, and they relied on each other. Communities shared knowledge, resources, and labor. They checked on the vulnerable. They kept social connections alive despite isolation. They understood what modern society often forgets, that individual survival depends on collective well-being. They also cultivated mental fortitude, creating routines that supported psychological health, finding meaning in hardship, and maintaining hope without denying reality. They struck a delicate balance, accepting conditions yet never surrendering to them. As you lie in your bed, these reflections drift through your mind like the slow smoke from your banked fire. But soon, the warmth of the room and the weight of the day overtake conscious thought. Your breathing begins to slow and deepen. Your body remembers the long, cold months of labor, the hauling of wood, the breaking of snowbound trails, the endless small movements needed to keep warm. Now, in the safety of your bed, each muscle begins to release its vigilance. It starts with your feet, those tough, curled, work-worn feet, always alert to cold floors and frozen earth. They uncurl, they rest. The soles soften into stillness. Your ankles let go of their brace. Your calves and knees release the last of their stiffness. Your thighs, so powerful and so tired, melt into the mattress. Your hips and lower back, often strained by awkward lifting or snowbound labor, settle with a sigh into perfect alignment. Each vertebra releases as your spine gently supports itself. Your belly loosens. Breath flows freely now, unencumbered by cold or caution. Your chest rises and falls in a calm rhythm, and within it, your heart beats steady and strong. Your shoulders, those silent carriers of burden, drop and broaden into rest. Your arms, heavy with earned fatigue, lie still. Hands that once gripped axe handles and frozen ropes slowly open fingers, falling into gentle curves of release. Your jaw unclenches. Your tongue rests. Even your eyelids grow heavy. Tiny muscles around your eyes soften, and your scalp, freed from months under hats and hoods, tingles pleasantly as it lets go. Thoughts become less distinct. The fire crackles. A night bird sings again. Somewhere the cabin settles with its own wooden sigh. These sounds become part of your descent, cradling rather than distracting. You're floating now, not quite awake, but not quite asleep. This is how people have fallen asleep for thousands of years, gradually, naturally in sync with the turning earth. No blue lights, no screens, just the body following the fading sun, resting more in winter, rising sooner in summer. A rhythm that our ancestors trusted, and that perhaps we should remember. Your breath deepens once more. Each exhalation takes you further. Inhalation brings peace. Consciousness fragments into dreams. You may see glimpses of your day, the sun's glint on melting snow, the steam from a horse's back, the feel of rough-hewn wood beneath your hands, or memories surface distant landscapes, loved ones, moments of rare connection and meaning outside the stars' wheel above, or clouds may gather promising more weather. Either way, the night holds its own secrets. But here, inside this small shelter, is your circle of warmth and safety. The cabin, the bed, your body whole and alive. Your eyelids are too heavy now, and there's no need to fight sleep. The room is safe. You are safe. Your breathing slows a final notch. Your heartbeat gentle and sure. The day's concerns, repairs, planting, rebuilding, fade into the background. Tomorrow will come, but not now. Now there is only this moment of surrender. Sleep approaches a gentle tide, rising to claim you. You've earned it, with preparation, with community, with strength. The frontier winter has shaped you, but not broken you. Your last tension dissolves, and sleep, the great healer and quiet keeper of the human spirit, welcomes you. You cross the threshold and drift away, into dreams, into peace.